What's up, everybody? It is Wednesday night. Preseason week 1 is just around the corner, if you can believe it. This 2023 year has just seemingly flown by, but that's neither here nor there. I'm Anthony. He's John, and this is the Orange and Black Insider. Happy to have you with us if you're joining live, if you're joining after the fact. Appreciate you tuning in and checking out the show. John, how's your week going, man? I know you've been busy with a lot of different stuff and hobnobbing with a lot of familiar faces and good friends.
Busy day today. Bengals had training camp, joint practice with the Packers, and I learned in line for getting in there that it was season ticket members only. So I had to get out of that line after seeing the man who made this hat, Joe Goodberry. But it was good. Observed practice from afar, aka on my computer, down to the banks, and then caught up with some people, stole this hat from Joe, and now I'm here. So lots to talk about.
Nice. Well, good to be with you, chatting it up, and good to be with everybody here, whether you're joining us on our YouTube channel, on the Cincy Jungle Facebook page, on Twitter, various Twitter accounts. We've got a lot of people tuning in live, so good to see everybody. A reminder, if you like what we're doing, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've got a fun video coming out, I think, later this week. You'll want to check that out. Of course, we'll be giving you this standard episode. We do the news episodes. We do the listener questions live, and then we're trying to pump you with a couple of other unique videos that will be filtering through the weeks ahead, and of course getting you all kinds of preseason coverage, regular season coverage here on this channel. So you got to subscribe to the show link underneath John there by the Cincy Jungle logo. That is, click that, subscribe, click the bell to be notified when we go live, when new content is available. Give us a thumbs up if you like what we're doing. We appreciate that. And of course, you can also get all kinds of other great shows, Bengals podcasts, on the Cincy Jungle podcast channel through your favorite audio streamer, whether that is iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, any of the major ones. We are there. Go subscribe, and you can listen to this show, Bengal Jim and Friends Talking Football, 3 and Out, and of course, the coach, Matt Minnick. We're trying to bring you all kinds of different episodes throughout the week. Hopefully you enjoy what we're doing there. All right, John. Well, I guess, we're not going to go in chronological order this week because first things first, I think we should probably talk about the preseason opener first, right? And kind of what to look for, what to achieve, I suppose, since that's on the forefront of everybody's mind. We can talk about the Packers and all kinds of stuff in a little bit here. But look, we've talked about this for a couple of years now with the condensed, I guess if you want to call it that, preseason, one less game. And of course, now no Joe Burrow. We've talked about him wanting to, we wanted him to get maybe a few more snaps than usual, but that's probably not going to happen, at least not for this week. So what should be, of course, avoid the injuries aside. I don't know, players to watch, a couple players that you're watching, things they should be achieving in this game and things we should be looking for.
So it doesn't seem like there's going to be a lot of starters playing in this game as expected. You got to remember last year when Burrow was not healthy, they didn't really want the starting offense to play with Brandon Allen, the backup at the time. They kind of kept the twos with the twos and the ones with the ones, if you will, during the preseason. So I would imagine who plays and who doesn't is going to be very similar to last year, which is why today's practice was pretty important because you had all the starters taking reps against the starters for Green Bay. So that was kind of like whatever 11s or 7s they did. That's kind of like their preseason-esque. So the players to watch are really, like, I think the players that really have caught our eyes during training camp that are actually going to play, right? It's a lot of it is the rookie class. You have DJ Turner, who's making great play after great play, great practice after great practice. He's going to be going up against, the Packers' second string receivers. Andre Yosevich on the other side of the ball. Can he keep his preseason momentum, training camp momentum going into the preseason? You have defensive linemen in Joseph Asai and Cam Sample who are going to get, I would assume, a decent amount of run while Trey Hendrickson, Sam Hubbard are watching from the sidelines. Miles Murphy, how quickly does he enter the game? How much does he play? I remember there's a whole controversy, 2 years ago with Joseph Asai. He was having a great first preseason game, just a third-round pick, and people didn't want him playing deep into the game. And then he got injured. Like, are they going to hold back Murphy, or are they going to give him time to really develop? Because it does seem like he does need those reps to really iron out a lot of the nuances of, stringing together pass rushing moves. Like, he needs that work, right? So how they divvy up the defensive line rotation, how they divvy up rotation at cornerback, right? DJ Ivy's obviously going to play a ton as a 7th-round pick as a rookie. He's going to be with, that second group of cornerbacks. I would imagine Sidney Jones and DJ Turner kind of get the start here, but all the names that you kind of heard circulating throughout news with training camp, like, they're all going to be on the forefront, right? Like, you're not going to see the stars of this team. You're going to see the training camp stars, aside from, the guys like pictured here, T. Higgins, who are shining regardless.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in Cam Taylor-Britt, who is pictured, I guess, a little low-hanging fruit there, just because, he kind of got into that high-profile role, or a high-profile role at the end of last year, and is really seemingly taking some nice additional strides as kind of the other starting corner here, going up, iron sharpening iron. He's going up against Chase in practice. You see him going up against Higgins here. So he has been tested, and he's been stepping up, making some nice plays. I like the DJs that you mentioned. Those are two guys at corner. So I'm really interested in the secondary in general, right? A lot of new faces at safety, a lot of new faces at cornerback, and you would figure that they're going to, get a lot of those guys in. We finally started to see at practice some of these 3 safety looks where it wasn't frequent, but Anarumo finally started to bring some of those looks out there where Dax Hill, Nick Scott, and Jordan Battle were all on the field at the same time. And I think it was Hill and Battle that were in the box. Scott back was kind of how he aligned it. So I'm interested to see if that continues, and what you mentioned last week too, that Lou Anarumo has been showing a lot of blitz packages, maybe a little bit more than we've seen in the past, particularly at this point in the preseason or training camp. So I'm interested to see kind of some of the defensive alignments and looks that he puts out there. But I don't want to take away thunder from a future segment that we're going to have here later, but a report from Paul Dehner Jr. on The Athletic talking about Jonah Williams and talking with Jonah Williams about embracing that right tackle role, John. He's probably going to get, I would think, maybe a little bit more time than either we anticipate, or maybe than some of the other starters, just to maybe get him a couple of other reps. That's just my, I don't know, gut feeling maybe. And because it is a quote unquote new position for him. So that's another guy I'm going to be watching, and Jackson Carman as well, how he steps in and plays. So a lot of different places to watch. I think, again, the ultimate goal is that everybody stays healthy. You avoid the big injuries, especially to important players. But, those are some of the areas to look for. The other thing I want to know, if it will translate in a preseason game, obviously Burrow's the man, and the offense moves at a much different pace with him in the lineup. There's no doubt about it. But what I'm curious about is if he, we've seen the backup quarterback so far make plays down the field. Jake Browning's been making some plays. Simeon's been making some plays here and there, and they've been able to push the ball downfield. It hasn't been a lot of, captain check down type of stuff, the offense going in a shell totally without Burrow in it. So I'm curious, as the real pads come on, the real snaps happen, you're going up against live action. If those deep balls, if some of these big plays will continue to happen with backup quarterbacks.
It's a good question. Because I feel like you're not going to see any of Higgins or Chase out there with Browning or Simeon in the preseason. So I think that probably impacts what they call offensively a little bit. And I will say that, as expected, once the pads actually came on in practice and training camp, some of the momentum with both Browning and Simeon has died off just a little bit. They're backups for a reason, and the Bengals defense is also pretty good. So they're good at disrupting routes and whatnot and getting after the quarterback. That's ultimately been like one of the biggest takeaways here, despite a lot of progression that we've seen from the likes of Asai and Sample, and Hendrickson continues to show up, and Zach Carter's having a good camp. There hasn't been a ton. It's not like the offensive line for the Bengals is going, completely AWOL. Like, they've been solid as well. It's just defensive linemen making good plays, and you have quarterbacks there who aren't really the greatest under pressure. So it's kind of led to some stalling out. And I think that was also ultimately the theme of practice today with the Packers. You had the Bengals defense, balling out and not really letting the Packers do much. You had some deep balls from Jordan Love. He connected to Romeo Dubes or Dobbs or whoever his name is a couple of times, but that was ultimately like the only progression that the Packers offense could make. And on the other side of the ball, like, it was more or less the same story. So that's kind of how it goes for training camp. And all, Jordan Love is the starter, but he doesn't have a lot of experience or really any experience as a starter. So he's widely unproven. And obviously, Browning and Simeon are exactly Browning and Simeon. So I don't expect a ton of fireworks in this preseason game, especially because I don't imagine a lot of starters are going to play. But it's a good question about Jonah, because I don't know. I feel like he's just done enough to like not even have to prove it at this point in a real preseason game. Like, he's taken the vast majority of reps as the starter now. It's not really much of a rotation anymore with Jackson Carman, who did not have a good day today. He was beaten inside, I think, multiple times by another rookie in Lucas Van Ness. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, Jonah was holding it down against the likes of Preston Smith, who's a pretty good edge. That competition, if you even want to call it a competition, it seems pretty over at this point. And there's been nothing but effusive praise from both Zach Taylor and Frank Pollock about the transition that Jonah has made at that spot. So I wouldn't be shocked if we didn't see him at all in this first preseason game.
Possibly. Part of what Daner said in his report there is basically, and I guess this plays a little bit to what you're saying there, is that Jonah he's starting to feel comfortable. He's starting to feel like maybe this position is kind of, he said it without saying it, and I don't want to misquote, but basically he's kind of feeling like, okay, this is my job. This is going to be my role. And you're starting to see the distance between both of them, Jonah Williams and Jackson Carman. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just interested, while you may be correct, and it is the first preseason game, you may be correct with your disagreement with me that Jonah may take maybe a couple more snaps than some of the other offensive linemen, if any. I still go back to what this team experienced with the slow start last year. And again, they can ill afford to start the same way with who they have on the schedule. And then now, you've got questions about when Burrow is coming back and all of that. So I am interested to see how this coaching staff approaches the snap counts for starters based on all of that. I mean, it's going to be limited, particularly in preseason one. You don't want to get, your starters injured or have devastating injuries for sure, but you also want to knock off the rust. You also want to get as close to firing on all cylinders once early September rolls around. So there's a very, very delicate balance that this coaching staff is going to have to walk with all of these guys in the snap counts.
I will say, like, if there is a position group on offense that gets run for the starters, it's probably the offensive line, just for the sake of continuity and everything. It's just they've been pretty fortunate that, aside from this minor strain that Alex Kappa's dealing with, there hasn't been a ton of movement in and out of that lineup. Like, the entire left side of the line has stayed healthy, so they've all worked together. So yeah, it's just a matter of how much do the coaches want to push it, right? So Kappa's probably not going to play if he hasn't practiced in the past couple of practices. And if that's the case, then maybe they want to just play conservative and give more time to guys like Trey Hill, Max Sharpening, Cody Ford, Jackson Carman, who definitely still needs those reps, right? I'm interested. I'm very interested to see what the official second string offensive line is at this point, because you've had both Trey Hill and Max Sharpening take snaps as an emergency center. Like, Trey Hill's been the backup center for 2 years, but if Max Sharping can prove that he can just do that job better, it gives him more positional versatility, gives him more security to make the roster. But Trey Hill is still a guy that's been taking plenty of second team reps. but he was subbed out for Cody Ford today at right guard against the Packers because he wasn't doing particularly well. So there's a lot of movement and shuffling that's still to be had in that second string. And I don't know if it's been finalized at this point, but I'm really interested to see what that group looks like and if they're honestly out there for the very first drive.
Yeah, I know. Again, I know there are questions about just the offensive line in general based on the past 2 seasons, but I think things are looking more steady, particularly with right tackle starting to kind of get a little clearer. Of course, Orlando Brown, and then you've got the 3 guys in the middle coming back. I think your starters are looking pretty solid. I think going forward, but going back to the offensive line, I think this is where we're going to see a lot in the first preseason game. Is that depth. If there is, God forbid, some of these injuries late in the season again, Sharping came in, he struggled against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, but played pretty well against the Bills, right? I mean, they held their own in the snow. And if you've got Jackson Carman who's struggling, you've got a Cody Ford, a guy who could be a valuable swing backup, like you've mentioned. Trey Hill has been in the lineup in games before. Yeah, there have been some penalties that we have seen from him when he has played. But, I mean, a guy that they like and positional versatility there too. So I think aside from maybe the starters being a bit more settled and being in a good spot this year, I think you also are going to hopefully see some good depth as the first preseason game goes on. And then hopefully also, I know we talked about throwing the football down the field and everything. I hope we can see some consistency in the run game from there as well.
I'm just glad that we've gotten to the point where we know who Cody Ford is and we're kind of past the mumbo jumbo of when he was signed, because there was the whole thing of when he signed in March, there was an agreement that he wanted to be a right tackle. He wanted to play a tackle, and it just never made sense. He was never going to beat out either Jackson Carman or Jonah Williams for that spot. Maybe not even Leo Collins had he been healthy. So he's at guard now, and that's where he needs to be. That's where the team needs him more than any other spot, and that's where he can succeed the most. If he has a chance of making this team, it's going to be at guard, and that was honestly I think that was the whole plan all along. Like he was going to play wherever he was needed, and fortunately, he's just ended up where his skill set matches up well. So I'm excited to see how he does at guard.
Yeah, Cody Ford. Let's see, in 2020 and 2021, he had 14 starts at both 7 at each guard spot, 7 at left guard in 2020 and 7 at right guard in 2021. I think he bounced around at a couple different spots with the Cardinals last year. Only had 3 starts there, 15 starts as a rookie at right tackle. So, it's pretty much pretty even across the board in terms of games started and positions started. Both guard spots, right tackle as a rookie, and then kind of a couple of different spots with the Cardinals last year. So, yeah, and then hopefully, Mr. Whisper, thank you so much for once again for your super chat. Hopefully, we talked a little Jonah for you there. Actually lined up well with kind of some of the stuff we were talking about. So, good to see you in the chat room, and thank you again for the super chat there. But John, I don't know, man. I mean, are we ever counting wins? Are we ever looking for the victories in preseason at this point?
No.
Or is it just kind of basics? And I kind of know the answer, which is what you emphatically just said. I mean, it's always nice to see a win, but I mean, the win is no injuries and at least see some semblance of organized and efficient football.
How many preseason games do you legitimately remember? Honestly, like you've been watching the Bengals for quite some time. Like how many preseason games?
I remember plays. I remember plays.
Yeah.
I don't really remember games. Like I remember the crazy John Ross play a couple of years ago against the Bills. Like when I think as a rookie, maybe. I remember certain plays, but yeah. I mean, overall, it's like I don't remember the games that much. Yeah.
The most vivid memory I have of a Bengals preseason game was Matt Scott vomiting. That's it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, but I mean the John Ross the John Ross touchdown, it literally changed a man's life. He made that cornerback quit in the locker room. I forget his name.
That's right.
Vontae Davis. Vontae Davis. He made Vontae Davis quit football. It's crazy.
That's right. I forgot about that part. Wow, we're rehashing some.
The preseason is for wacky stuff made by players who don't have a ton of opportunity, right? And it's why.
That's right.
I mean, it's their platform to showcase their value. And the Bengals have, it's a good problem to have. They have a ton of guys who either are going to make this team or are going to be signed really quickly to another team. And this is the chance for them to put on film and play against competition that's very equal to them. And there's a reason why, right? Like they're fighting for roster spots. They have very little job security to their names. Like some of them have draft statuses and whatnot, but for a lot of these guys, it's going to be special teams because they're going to be, at least 7 punts on both sides. And there's going to be a lot of broken plays too. And it's a chance for them to kind of create out of structure and kind of surprise people, right? So it's a great platform in that sense to give these guys who don't have a ton of prospects to sign the biggest contracts or last as long as the NFL. This is their moment to shine. That's what matters to me.
Well, talking about nice segue here, you've been going to the last couple of practices, I think late last week, and you tried to get in there today, but season tickets only, gatekeeping on John Sheeran.
Literally.
But, yeah. But you have been in there in person. I logistically cannot, but you have seen some things. So I wanted to get, we talked about maybe getting some practice reports from you and everything. I know that can be difficult while you're there, but I kind of figured after the fact we can ask you about some of the things that you saw in person that you were either found particularly interesting or were surprised by at the practices you attended.
I don't know if like any surprises necessarily. My mind does go to Jonah because I don't think he's had a bad practice yet, and obviously, half the practices weren't in pads, and it's still, there's an emphasis on not to touch the quarterback, so you have to question how hard defensive linemen are going. But the transition has been seamless. Like it's just he's clearly the guy at right tackle at this point, and that's obviously great to see, right? If Kappa is indeed healthy for week 1. You have a legitimately you have a legitimately good offensive line with the potential to be great. And that's just so much more than what this team has had for the past 7 or so years. And they're going up against, I think, really good defensive linemen who are progressing really well. Like Joseph Asai and Cam Sample have done quite a bit to keep a distance from Miles Murphy, right? The whole thing was how Miles Murphy's a first round pick. He's 21 years old. He's maybe their most athletic defensive end that they have. And that's not even saying that Osai's a slouch because Osai's a freak athlete as well. But both of those guys entering their third years, like they've done a really good job. They've had really good reps in their one-on-ones and they've created some disruption. So it's really good to see their progression as well. Like in the trenches right now, this team is built really strong, and the camp is usually about receivers and cornerbacks. And we've talked ad nauseum about how, well DJ Turner has transitioned to NFL life. Andre Yosevich is looking pretty damn consistent for an Ivy Leaguer coming into the NFL as a rookie. So a lot of highlights from this rookie class, but I think as far as the trenches go, compared to years past when we've seen some inconsistency, some struggles, some concerns grew, even if they weren't justified. It's not really that sense right now. This is business. It almost seems as business as normal for these guys, and that newfound sense of competency and really just strength going up against strength. It's really created some good practices. So yeah, the receivers have been good, the cornerbacks have been good, but I think what's really stood out to me is how good these trenches look.
What's your sense? And I don't know if you can gather it from your vantage point, really. I mean, I know we've seen a lot of videos and a lot of, clips. And my sense of the Bengals, I don't know if you want to call it attitude or approach or whatever you want to call it this year in this training camp would have been, still having that, looseness and that camaraderie that we've seen and a lot of fun times and solid locker room and all that we have seen the last couple of years that helped them achieve a high level of success here. But are you seeing maybe a tiny bit more buttoned up approach, or are things still a little bit different because Burrow hasn't been in there since practice number 2? So, I mean, I don't know. What's your sense of the attitude or the approach that when you were there at the practices in person?
I don't really get a vibe either way. Like, it's not like these guys are so loose or they're so just, tunnel vision on just getting the work done. I think they're just extremely comfortable with who they are and the structure that they've established, right? Like, this is Zach's 5th year. It's been basically the same in terms of training camp scheduling and formatting for the past 3 or 4 years now, ever since he kind of got his feet under him. Everyone is comfortable with what the plan is, I think, and that like guys are still clearly having fun. Like you have Chase, doing the gritty after touchdowns and whatnot. You still have guys, smiling and
Right.
laughing to the side, but like they're getting the work done because I think they're confident in the way that the plan is kind of laid out for them and the way that the structure is laid out for them. So I think the best way to put it is that they know that the system works and they've seen the results of that for the past 2 years, and obviously they want to get it to one step further. But like they have a winning formula for the first time
Mm-hmm.
in a long time, and I think they're committed to that. And once you realize that that's a thing, you can kind of feel comfortable just going through the motions. And a lot of guys are just kind of being themselves, but they're still getting like quality work done. Like they've had quality practice after quality practice.
Well, how were you seeing? I know you put up a video, or I think you put up a video on what the hell do we call it now? Is it X officially, not Twitter?
I'm not
What the hell
calling
do
it
we
X.
call this thing? Okay, Twitter. Okay, the Bird app. You put up a
Yes.
video on Chase Brown, and I think you did, right? I should have pulled that up,
Yep.
but basically it was what was the read on it? Kind of a cutback run where it was it
Little shotgun power.
shotgun, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was. I guess. What have you seen from him, or what did you see from him in practices? Is there a clear indication of is it going to be by committee 2A 2B, or is it is there someone kind of impressing you? I know Travion had that injury, so that's kind of an issue there. But I don't know. Just kind of some backup running back chatter or the running game in general.
Well, I'm really glad that Trayvon's ankle is not serious. He's going to be back in practice, I think, within the next couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So the team really likes him. He's going to make the team. So that's not a worry. It's honestly been interesting and kind of cool to see both Chase Brown and Chris Evans kind of, grasp at whatever opportunities there for them now, because now they're taking the snaps right behind Joe Mixon. And we've talked on this show about we don't even know who Chris Evans is at this point. We don't know if the coaches trust him. He's not
Right.
going away, I don't think, which has been kind of surprising to me. Like that first practice when Travion wasn't out there, they did like a 2-minute drill and Chris Evans was the running back, and then they had Joe Mixon kind of filling in for him on certain downs. So Chris Evans has not been going away. Like he still has a place on this depth chart right now. He's still going to get opportunities in the preseason. I would say so. I think he's kind of gotten a wake up call a little bit. Like if I don't perform well this year, I probably will get cut. You don't know if they're going to go with 4 running backs this year, but Chase Brown looks exactly like the Chase Brown of Illinois, and the guy was extremely productive in similar concepts that the Bengals I think want to run this year. They're going to run
Mm-hmm.
plenty out of shotgun, but they're going to run more power. They're going to run more gap schemes. He was dynamite in those exact concepts. Like so many times at Illinois, just like pull guys around the line of scrimmage out of shotgun, and it wouldn't even be perfect blocking, but Chase is just so efficient with his footwork. It's like watching a lot of Giovanni Bernard, and I know it's a lazy comparison, but you remember Gio's lightning quick feet, but he never looked like
Yep.
he was like at his feet like too fast and he lost any balance. No, Chase Brown has plenty of balance with how quick he is, and that leads to really efficient movements. He gets through his reads really quickly. He follows his blocks, and that leads to the positive runs that like what I showed on Twitter. So Chase Brown will get plenty of opportunities in the preseason, but I think that competition, if you will, between like who's RB3 behind Williams, is it Chris Evans, is it Chase Brown? It might be closer than I would think. I think it still ultimately goes to Chase because I think he's just the better overall runner, and I think it'll really be determined about like how efficient Chris Evans is in the preseason. But Chris Evans has gotten special team snaps as well, and I think he's taking that pretty seriously. So that I guess that's an interesting battle. It's maybe closer than I would have thought.
We have kind of a tongue in cheek, I think, kind of funny, but I mean it's a good question. I'd like to know Evan's TD to snap ratio. I don't have the snap ratio, but I have. Yeah, I mean that the total touches ratio, 18 receptions, and it looks like 17 rushing attempts. So that comes to 35 total touches and 3 total touchdowns. So he is averaging a touchdown, John, every 11.67 touches. in the NFL in his 2 seasons. I don't have a snap count. I didn't get
125
you put me on the
total
spot.
snaps.
Okay. So now let's really deep dive. 41.67.
One every 62. Oh, okay, yeah, he's got 3. I forgot.
Yeah. So 40 every 41.67 snaps. And what did I say? Every 11.67 touches. There you go. We tag team that to answer Mike's questions. There you go, Mike. Hopefully you enjoyed that nugget of information on Chris Evans. That is interesting to know, to see that to hear that he's, stepping up and not going away. It's hard to imagine that the Bengals, do they keep 4 active running backs on the roster going forward? There's so much depth now and so many guys to like at wide receiver. How do you double? They want to have a lot of bodies, and able bodies on the offensive line. So is running back just going to be one of those spots where they go light? But it's good. It's good to see that competition is bringing out some of the best in Chris Evans. We've seen a lot of fun moments from him, but a lot of frustrating and disappearing acts from him as well.
Yeah. Running back is always interesting to me because I think in the past 2 years, because this roster is more or less constructed the same, like the strengths are what they were a couple years ago, aside from maybe offensive line. And in each year, I would have pegged that the Bengals would have only kept 3 running backs, and they ended up keeping 4, at least in that first week. So I'm in the same boat this year, where like there's no way they keep more than 3 running backs, because wide receiver, cornerback, defensive line, like all these positions of strength, you want to keep as many of them as possible. But historically, even in Zach Taylor's time, like they've kept 4 running backs. So maybe that's what it is this year, and they're just going to have to go light someplace else. I wouldn't do that if I were them, but I'm certainly not discounting it as a possibility.
Good to hear about Yoshevich as well. He had, I think, early, there was some stuff about some drops and drills and different things like that. So it's good to see that he is stepping up in some ways. I know Charlie Jones had some nice practices, hurt the shoulder, and then I think he came back and had, another nice practice or so. We'll see if he ends up playing Friday night, but seems like both of those guys are stepping up nicely and doing the things that we all kind of hoped for and envisioned when they were drafted by this team, and bringing some nice depth to that wide receiver group.
Yeah, we all know they scout receivers really well, but it's like it's seen similar things to like what Trent Irwin was when he first came on, because like Irwin, like better athletes compared to Irwin, but winning in similar ways, like contested catch situations, winning in the red zone. Irwin had that amazing one-handed grab in red zone drills. Like it's been a lot of those similar things that they clearly value. And now you have guys who are considerably faster and quicker, and obviously younger compared to Irwin. So like their spots on the roster are pretty secured at this point. It would be nice to see if Jones can actually just take some punts and just show some competency, so he can just officially win that over Trent Taylor. Because like you said, like if Jones isn't out there in the preseason, at least this week, like most of those opportunities are going to go to Trent Taylor. And we don't know if he's just going to be auditioning for another team, or if they're going to force the Bengals to keep him as like a 7th receiver. Like we don't know. Like we've kind of assumed that Jones is just going to replace Taylor. But if Jones can't actually go out there and actually do it, it at least opens the door to Taylor sticking around.
It does. I mean, look, man. I mean, from the first segment, we were talking about what to look for in preseason, and then now yours and a little bit of mine observations, but yours in-person observations that you've seen from training camp. What are we talking about, man? We're talking about, we like what we've seen from the trenches. We like what we've seen from these positional battles at the back end of depth charts, running back, wide receiver. It's a deep team. It's a talented team. I mean, we knew that, but now they are really, really exuding that and really, really putting that to work at these practices, and it's fairly obvious. And so, again, I mean, no Burrow in these practices. You can't. Everybody's chomping at the bit. I know we've had a couple of questions in here about when Burrow is back. They were keeping that mum, but he was at practice today, Wednesday, in I believe a bucket hat and kind of cruising around, right, waving to the people. And then he was seen shortly after the injury, I think it was Mike Petraglia who relayed this on Twitter. He was seen, cruising around, I think, the locker room and not showing signs of a limp, that sort of thing. He does have the sleeve on the leg still. So there's some people, oh, he's not going to play week 1. I'm still skeptical of that situation in terms of him not playing late to start the season, but they're keeping it so close to the vest. It's really, really hard to tell exactly what progress has or hasn't been made.
Zach Taylor's changed nothing about what he said for 2 weeks now. He's been asked a couple times, and his answer has been several weeks. Still means several weeks from the time that he originally said it. It just seems like they have nothing to really gain by giving people like consistent updates. Yeah, right. So like, I don't think it's deliberately to confuse the Cleveland Browns in 32 days time as to what quarterback is going to be out there, but I think they're rightfully taking it slow. They're monitoring the progress, and if they don't have to say anything specific, then they don't have to, right? But this was the first time we've seen Burrow actually move, and in person, he doesn't look like he's lost 30 pounds like he did last year, whatever the number may be.
Right.
If you want to nitpick, maybe that little stroll had maybe the tiniest hint of a limp. We don't know if that's just being precautionary.
I don't know if ginger is the right word, right? Just kind of,
He's keeping it light, he's not doing sprints out here. But no, he seems okay. And again, by all accounts, by everyone who's more qualified to talk about this than us, this looks like a grade 1 strain, which typically has like a 2 to 3 week recovery time. Considering they don't play for 4 weeks, they can take it even slower, and there should be nothing that prevents him from practicing the week of that Cleveland Browns game and looking like his normal self. But this is still an injury that, when you think it's fine, it can end up biting you in the butt. So they're just going to take this slow, and we'll see him when we see him.
Yep. Mike Jones, we did talk about Zach Carter. John said he's been looking pretty good, obviously bulked up and really took this offseason seriously. So I think, John, just to reiterate, you think you've seen some good things from him out of practice this year, and a guy that I think really, while one of the bigger question marks, one of the more important guys, even as a rotational guy, a guy that needs to really kind of step up, because they have not gone elsewhere really to bring in his specific position, meaning interior defensive line, and a guy that can hopefully get a little bit of push in the pass rush and help out in the run game.
I'll say this about Carter, because he showed very, very few signs last year of being a competent pass rusher. It was just towards the end of the season when he was just better against the run, because he just was finding the ball, and that definitely helps. He's physically so much better to play defensive tackle now than he was last year. He just put on like a ton of bad weight, I think, last year, just to be able to survive between the B gaps, because he was kind of like an edge at Florida, and he was like 280. So he probably bulked up to like 295 with bad weight. Now he's probably close to 300 with good weight. And that means he's more explosive, while also being able to be strong enough and powerful enough to take on blocks in those tight areas. So I don't know what the progression has been in terms of his hand usage, in terms of stringing together moves, in terms of his snap timing and everything like that. But I think physically he looks more like what the Bengals need him to be, and that's a rotational 3 technique.
Yeah, and then we've also got, let me pull this one up here, another from Mr. Generosity, Mr. Whisper. If you feel inclined, by the way, don't just rely on Mr. Whisper to send us these YouTube chats, which more often than not go to a specific charity. So thank you, Mr. Whisper. John, any signs of ball security issues with Chase Brown? I know it was one of his knocks in the draft. That was one of his knocks. I don't know if it's too easy to tell with certain drills and things that they've been doing as opposed to game action there, but obviously a question that is worth asking.
Yeah, it'd be really bad if any of the running backs were fumbling right now, considering they're not being tackled. I think the only fumble that I've seen was Trevor Siemian scrambling out of the pocket, which, again, doesn't really do him any favors. But no, I haven't seen any fumbles from Chase Brown yet.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on here. We're going a little long here, and we've got a couple more things to cover, and one of which, of course, is the joint practice today. My, oh my, was it a defensive effort. And our guy Zim Hude put out a tweet that got, a lot of run all kinds of places, because a certain particular Bengals player who's just fresh off of a contract extension, Mr. Trey Hendrickson, had 7, by most people's count, 7 sacks against the Packers offensive line today. Obviously, that is just incredible in and of itself. But you talked about it a little earlier, John. I mean, Jordan Love, there's some questions about him. Obviously, them coming out of the Aaron Rodgers era, Packers fans have been insanely spoiled at the quarterback position over the last 30 years, right? So I mean, there's a lot of questions there. So obviously it's practice and scrimmaging and all that kind of stuff, not real game. But needless to say, your comment about that still holds about the trenches showing off really well, particularly the defensive line. That plays right into that, and that's a good thing to see for a guy that's taken a lot of snaps the past couple of years and just got another nice little contract extension.
Blackout Trey doesn't mess around. Apparently, I don't know if 7 is legit. I'm inclined to believe
7-ish.
If that was the actual count. And also, I mean, like they're not like you can't finish the play, so you don't know if the play would have actually resulted in a sack. But man, like he had 2 years left on this deal. He was 28 years old this year. They just drafted a first-round pick at the position. All the signs were like, yeah, this guy was going to play out this contract and maybe regress a little bit because he's been so damn good the past 2 years. He just looks like the same dude. Like he's really good, man. It's like I don't know. Like he just wins in his own way, and that's not with incredible explosion. He wins with relentless hand fighting. He wins with a plan, and he won today. Like Jordan Love's pocket presence and awareness may not be the best, but the edge group is really good, man. It's legitimate strength now, I think.
And they need it, right? I mean, they need this group with the AFC quarterbacks, with the athleticism that they face at the positions, and undoubtedly in the postseason, who they'll be facing. I mean, you're talking big guys. You're talking guys who are either very nimble or nimble enough. Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence. I mean, these are big guys that have the ability to also move. Gone are the days of the really the kind of statuesque Drew Bledsoe, Carson Palmer type of quarterbacks. If you're a big guy, you got to be able to move around. You got to be able to do things. And if you are a defensive lineman, if you are an edge rusher, you have to be able to be prepared for that. And you have to be able to get a guy to the ground or make him uncomfortable enough to force a bad throw. And so the Bengals, there's been some consistency issues a little bit in terms of, overall quarterback sacks. I know there are a lot of other stats and metrics that you can measure, quarterback pressures and effectiveness of defensive lines by, but undoubtedly you want that number to rise, right? And that's the Bengals have taken note of that. That's why they extended Trey Hendrickson. That's why they used a first-round pick on a defensive lineman. And that's, they need additional pressure. And that's why also going back to a topic we just talked about, that's why Zach Carter is a critical component of what they're trying to do up front.
Yeah. That entire defense was suffocating Green Bay today, by all accounts. I think he even had PFF Steve and Mike, or not Mike, Sam down there. They were tracking all the plays, and DJ Reader was also having a pretty good day, disrupting stuff in the middle. Obviously, there was what happened at the end of practice, and
right?
Yeah, should we talk about this because there's people?
Yeah, let's do it.
Why not?
Okay. Hey, that's part of camp, and that's part of what happens at these joint practices, right? They get sick of beating up on their own guys, and they obviously don't want to hurt their own guys. But these guys, both teams, they're sick of just kind of going up against their own guys. They see another team, and that's kind of part and parcel of these joint practices and scrimmages and everything.
So what I gauged from Twitter was that there was a little screenplay, and Eldon Jenkins, who's a really good offensive lineman for the Green Bay Packers, got out in space and kind of took Jermaine Pratt to the ground. Pratt wasn't really fond of that, so they ended up in a scuffle or kerfuffle, if you will.
There you go.
The whole dust cloud formed like a cartoon. You had like limbs flying around everywhere. Joe said that like Trey Hendrickson was like pulling someone and like threw him over. Like a lot of stuff was happening, right? It's a whole pile that you can't really tell. Eldon wasn't done though, because I think maybe not the very next play, but a play after that, he was still frustrated and I guess, slapped or threw a punch at DJ Reader, and Reader wasn't having that. So they got into it, and then that forced the Packers to remove Jenkins' 2 strikes and you're out policy. And I think what Reader said after practice kind of summed it up. Like Jenkins, it was a hot day, right? You're frustrated, but you're there to just disrupt practice. You're not putting in good work, and that was what Reader's sentiment was. Like some guys don't want to practice; they just want to goof around. And Reader wasn't too happy with it. Not because obviously no one can hurt DJ Reader, no one can physically possibly do that. But I think Reader was just annoyed with Jenkins's antics and disrupting practice, and rightfully so.
Yeah, I mean, the consensus also, John, like we've said, is that the Bengals defense was more or less having their way with the Packers offense. And when you are on offense and that sentiment, is permeating throughout your entire unit, you're going to get frustrated. you're going to look to take it out on somebody, and you're going to look to maybe cross a little bit of a line in doing so. But like you said, it's hot. We're now, this isn't, hey, we're on the first day of practice, we're excited, that sort of thing. I mean, it's a little exciting that you're going up against another team, but it's kind of the dog days right now, right? It's like, man, it's hot, it's humid. We're in pads, and if there's a questionable hit, we're gonna let you know about it. And I think that's kind of a little bit of what occurred today. But go ahead.
No, it was funny because you kept seeing like the reports, like, damn, the Bengals defense looks really good. And I was thinking the only thing that can stop them is like Aaron Donald at this point throwing helmets. And that was right when Jenkins threw the first punch.
Yeah.
DJ Reader called him just a guy because he was upset. But for the record, Eldon Jenkins is really, really good, but just not a good day for him.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think also one of the Steve Palazzolo of I hope I said his last name right, of PFF noted. I think it may have been maybe even potentially before this joint practice, but he mentioned on Twitter, just again going on the other side of the trenches, that this offensive line is probably going to be the best one that Burrow has played in the NFL, and they are kind of showing it. Again, kind of corroborating Paul Dehner's story that we referenced earlier about Jonah looking good at right tackle and settling in there. So, we had all these questions, and what about, is Jonah going to fit in and all of that? And now, it's way too early. We got to see what happens in the games and everything. But now there may be a good problem on their hands with, him entering a contract year. Is he a guy in the long-term plans? I know there's a lot of money being doled out to a lot of different players already, and there will be more money doled out to a lot of different players. But the Bengals may have a good problem on their hands, and a lot of national guys are noticing that the Bengals offensive line has taken steps of improvement.
Jonah is like the biggest. Jonah and Orlando Brown were the biggest parts of that because they knew what they had from an interior sense. Like Kappa and Karras are both good. What's up, Lindsey? Cordell Volson was supposedly going to take this next jump, and it looks like he's on that track. Orlando Brown was brought in to just be better at left tackle than Jonah Williams. And Jonah Williams was hopefully going to be better at right tackle than either Jackson Carman or La'el Collins, and that looks to be the case. I think the cool thing with Jonah is that, he didn't get necessarily, like, not the closure, but he didn't get the communication that he wanted from the Bengals in the offseason.
Right.
But I think he's more or less kind of accepted it, and he seems really content. He seems really happy with the situation that's unfolding. He's a starter for a really good team, and he's playing really well. He's healthy, and I don't see these two sides kind of coming together all kumbaya at the end of the season unless Jonah just absolutely balls out and just looks like one of the best tackles. And even then, he probably played out of the Bengals price range. I think he's just thinking to himself, I'm going to just play the best that I possibly can, and hopefully that's good enough to earn a really big contract with another team, because the ship probably has sailed between him and the team. But it's not like, I don't think he's like resentful. I think he's still okay with the situation. He's just kind of accepted, and maybe the Bengals have too.
Yeah, I think also he can look at, even though he's on a rival team now, he can look at Juwan Taylor and kind of the career arc there and the contract he received this offseason, and maybe, kind of say, hey, if I play well here, even though it's positions left tackle, I have, hopefully quality tape playing right tackle now, and I'll be a hot commodity on the market. But regardless, it's about here and now, and hopefully he continues to settle in, because all indications are that Jonah Williams is settling in well at right tackle. And you love, if you are a Bengals fan, you love to hear that. You love to see that. We're going to get anything else we want to talk about on the joint practice before we start closing up, John, about the Packers and the Bengals. It's always, when these two teams play, by the way, whether it's practice or not, it's pretty wild. I mean, today was tame comparative to some of the regular season games we have seen in the past handful of years.
I think Evan McPherson still thinks about that game, to be honest.
So yeah. There had to have been, like, between extra points and field goals missed, I have to go back and, I mean, what, 4 or 5 missed
at least
in that game?
Yeah.
That was unbelievable. Yeah. And then even the games before that, man, you can go back to the far 5-pick game where the guy took the ball out of his hands at the end of the game. Yep. He ran on the field, and the Aaron Rodgers, Daniel Coates game from a hand. Man, there's a lot of
Terrence Newman taking it back from the house.
Yeah. So Packers Bengals, they never just that's a good rivalries video. Maybe we'll, we did some unlikely rivalries with the Seahawks and Bengals on our channel. Maybe we'll do one of those with the Packers, because there have been some wacky ass games between those two teams for sure. All right, we've got one little fun historic thing. We've done some things before where we say, like, remember him or remember when. I'm a little bit of a history buff, and I'm definitely a history buff with the Cincinnati Bengals. So I like to go back and either talk about some players and sometimes remember him. I don't know. So does that have a negative connotation? Because it's like, hey, this guy, was he kind of a slouch? I don't know. But I don't like necessarily the connotation. So I'm changing, at least for this week, I'm changing the name of this segment. Now, John, do you know who this guy is? Can you name me this guy on the screen?
It's not Reggie Kelly.
It's not Reggie Kelly.
I cannot. I don't think I can.
Okay, well, this is Tony McGee.
I didn't know he was 82.
Yeah, Tony McGee, tight end for the Cincinnati Bengals. He was before Jermaine Gresham, he was before Reggie Kelly, and after Rodney Holman. And because of when he played for the Cincinnati Bengals in that lost decade of the 90s with a quarterback carousel all over the place, he kind of gets forgotten. But he was a pretty productive player for this team when they were terrible. And coming out of the Rodney Holman era, a guy who made like 3 Pro Bowls with the Bengals and was one of the better tight ends of his generation, they drafted this guy as kind of his replacement, essentially. I think it was in 92. So it was right around when Holman left the Bengals. And so this is a player that they liked. He went to Michigan, I think. So sorry, Buckeye fans there. But John, he played 9 years in Cincinnati. 322 catches, over 4,000 yards, almost 4,100 yards receiving, and 21 touchdowns. Now, not necessarily overly gaudy numbers, but you're talking about an era where Jay Schrader was a quarterback. You're talking about an era when Akili Smith was a quarterback. You're talking about an era with, some great years with Jeff Blake. And, oh, by the way, those were his best statistical years. But a guy who is just a real, a warrior, a guy who kept his head down and has had, by all accounts, a pretty successful career after playing, 12 total years in the NFL. So kudos to him. His best seasons were the better Jeff Blake years. He had 40 catches for 492 yards in 1994. And in 95, a real solid year for a tight end, especially. This is the other thing, John. The Bengals had, during Tony McGee's career, they had Carl Pickens and Darnay Scott for the bulk of it. Right? He was drafted in 93, by the way. I said 92, but 93. They had Carl Pickens and Darnay Scott. They had a guy who contributed a little bit, David Dunn, throughout, kind of the prime of Tony McGee's career. And then, oh, by the way, in 97, Corey Dillon comes around. So just not a guy that gets talked about a lot. But when you look at some of the better years by quarterbacks in this stretch of years that were really, really terrible for the Bengals and their quarterbacks, I said in 94, 40 catches, 492 yards. As a rookie, 44 catches, 525. And then you look at 95 when Blake was a Pro Bowler, 55 catches, 754 yards, and 4 touchdown receptions. Another 4 touchdown catches the year after. And then when Boomer came in at the end of 97 and really sparked a really good year along with Dylan at the end of that season, he had a career high 6 touchdown catches in that season. So never made a Pro Bowl. But you look at the games played for Cincinnati too, 15, 16, 16, 16, 16, 16, 16, 14, and 9 at the end. 11 at the end of his career. So durable, valuable, and just a guy, you know me. I like the position of tight end. I think there's a lot of fun players who have played that position. And so this is a guy who kind of gets forgotten between the Reggie Kelly, Jermaine Gresham kind of era, and then of course after the Rodney Holman era. So Tony McGee, a salute to the stripes. That's what we're calling it, at least this week. Tony McGee.
I like that. Not a Ring of Honor guy, but deserves his reparations for playing in the 90s. I thought I was losing my mind though, because I heard Tony McGee. I'm like, that's not Tim McGee's name. And then I'm like, nope. That's why like, yeah, I don't think he was 82, but yeah, this is a completely different player who deserves his respect. Tony McGee.
Yeah. So again, 299 catches as a Bengal, 322 in his career, 3,700. I misspoke earlier. 299 catches as a Bengal, 3,795 yards, 20 total touchdowns as a Cincinnati Bengal, 21 total in his career. So again, not eye-popping numbers, but just a solid guy. And you have to remember too, again, with all the quarterback problems, and then you had the 2 great receivers that the Bengals had, Darnay Scott and Carl Pickens during most of his time. Really good, really good, solid player that doesn't get talked about enough in Bengals circles. So with that being said, let us close up. We'll do our usual mic drop, but I think our good friend Lindsay here asked us for a score prediction or a bold prediction. Score predictions in preseason, and we get goofy with those anyway, so I don't know if we want to do that. But you got maybe a bold or a surprise prediction for Friday night?
I'm going to give let's go 18-15 Bengals. Try to get as wacky as possible. I'm going to say Reed Sinnett has the longest completion of any Bengals quarterback, maybe any quarterback in the game.
Okay.
I'll say that.
Now,
yeah.
Okay. Air yards you're talking about?
Yeah.
Actual air yards? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I will say DJ Ivy pick 6.
Oh,
I will say DJ Ivy pick 6, not to put so much pressure on the young
buying
man,
the hype.
Yeah, I am buying that kid's hype. I think he is a nice find at the end of. Now, I mean, whether that translates in the regular season this year as a rookie, I don't know, but I think he's a nice find. So you got Reed Sinnett with the biggest completion of the game for either team from John, and a bold one from me, DJ Ivy pick 6. We're gonna again close up shop. Crypt Keeper here. I got a piece of Bengals history for you, AC. Did you know the Bengals wear the white jerseys all year in 94 except one game, but it was the throwback game against the Patriots. I don't really remember the white jerseys all that year. I do remember the throwback game, and I was reminded of that somewhat recently because I think 94 was that 75th year anniversary for the league. And so many teams, I remember the old school cowboy ones that now kind of more closely resembled some of the uniforms they wore in the 2000s. But I remember there were a lot of teams that did the old throwback uniforms that year because it was a 75th anniversary. And then after that, the NFL kind of continued to be the no fun league with the uniform stuff. I don't remember them wearing the whites all that year though. Do you remember that, John? I mean, were you even born then? I don't even know, but
I was not born.
Yeah. Okay. So good one there though. Good one. Thank you, Crypt Keeper. Appreciate that. All right. Let's drop the mic and get out of here. What do you got for us, John, as we close up shop?
On the subject of uniforms, the Bengals are just making 10-year-old John just happier than a pig in mud in the past 2 years. Updating these uniforms to look clean. The NFL actually allowing them to wear the white helmets with the white jerseys that actually match the helmets. The whole thing with that is they had to, submit, this is according to Joe, they had to submit the white jersey, white pants, and white socks as a separate alternate uniform compared to just the white jersey, white pants, black socks, which they wear somewhat decently
right.
often. So that is officially their second alternate that they will wear twice this year against the Rams and Jags. And if you're betting on both those games, pick the Bengals in the spread. There's no way they're losing in those uniforms.
Yeah, and I think this was kind of all part of the letter that they, the social media, they had the letter that they wrote. And then I think Kay Adams of the Up and Adams show, did like a narrative through Bengals social media. She is like all on board with the Cincinnati Bengals, which I love to see. Anyway, so yeah, there's kind of some fun around it, and they that'll be cool to see. That'll be cool because they had the old school. Well, I guess I don't know if I want to call it old school, but they had kind of the block numbering right jersey that they wore with that. Yeah. So cool. It'll be cool to see. Obviously the white helmet. Everybody loves that at least for a couple times a year. I would be remiss if we didn't at least give a tip of the cap to Mr. Ken Riley making the Hall of Fame and the amazing job that his son did in inducting him and his wife there, and seeing Ken Riley's bust and seeing Anthony Munoz and a slew of other Bengals who played with him. I think there's a really, really cool picture of Anthony Munoz, Jim Breach, Reggie Williams, and a number of others that were there at Canton for this. We'll see if we can maybe get Ken Riley II back on the program, at least to maybe talk about to talk about his experience there and everything, the emotions going with that. We'll see if we can. We would love to have him back on. He's a great guy, but he did an excellent job. I felt so great for the family, and I felt really, really good for Bengals fans because that is just something that has not occurred. I mean, when did Munoz get in? Mid to late 90s, right? First year eligible. So I think he was 97, 98 maybe. So, I mean, we're talking, multiple decades here since the Bengals have had since the Bengals have had a Hall of Fame player, and it's coinciding with some of, their most successful years as a franchise. So it's a really cool time for the franchise and a really, really cool moment for the Riley family. We are very, very happy for you. Of course, we want to continue to support the Ken Riley 13 Foundation. So, maybe we can do something kind of cool with Ken Riley II if he's willing and able to come on the program. But I thought that was a really, really cool thing this last weekend.
I mean, how many Hall of Fame speeches give a shout out to a specific fan? I think that was pretty cool that Bengal Jim got a shout out. Well deservedly for doing the jungle to the hall, and their work is far from done. I think another Ken is next up here.
Yep, that's most definitely deserving. John, this has been a hell of a fun episode, man. Cruised by, we talked about a lot of cool stuff, and we are actually talking about actual live football. We're gonna have a fun football. We're gonna have a fun video tomorrow. My understanding is our guy, Mr. Jason Garrison, is a little under the weather, so he's not going to be able to. I don't think there's going to be a 3 and Out episode on the channel this week. But John, if you are, we'll coordinate. We're going to do some form of a post game show, I think, for Friday, and talk about the game, talk about what we saw, and have some fun with that. So we will be back for that. We'll have kind of a fun. It's either going to launch either Thursday or Saturday. We'll see when this guy can get around to it, but we'll have a fun video. Hopefully it'll be a new one, a new series we're going to launch on here, and hopefully you'll have some fun with it. But thank you, everybody. We had a lot of live viewers. I think people are excited about the Bengals and that live football is back, and we're not talking about the abstract anymore, John. We're talking about the actual, which is awesome. And so fun episode, a lot of engagement. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in live. Thank you for tuning in after the fact and catching it on your favorite platform. Again, just to remind you, on our way out, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel with the show icon underneath John Sheeran there by the Cincy Jungle icon. And of course, get the show and all of the Cincy Jungle podcast shows on your favorite audio streamer. Get all of your opinions, analysis, everything on cincyjungle.com. And of course, catch the great work from my guy, John Sheeran, over at A to Z Sports, the written page from him over there, and all the great work they do there too. So check that out. Join us Friday night for a post-game show. Should be fun. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, John. Appreciate you, man. Appreciate you.
Let's get it.